Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of The Chocolate Life Live. My name is Clay Gordon. I'm the creator and the moderator of TheChocolateLife.com, and I want to welcome everybody who's joined me today. And to remind quickly, please go into the comments, the chat, wherever you're watching, YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, and let me know where you're connecting in from today, and I will give a shout out on the screen. I know that we have a global audience, and I always like to connect with the people who are watching and participating live. And I do look at all the comments. And so if you put something into the live stream afterwards, I will also follow up afterwards as well, no matter where the comment is, LinkedIn, YouTube, or Facebook, right? And with, excuse me, that quick introduction out of the way, what I want to do is I want to introduce the concept for today's live stream. And I'm going to be taking a look over the course of the next several weeks at some of the posts that have been the most popularly visited on the Chocolate Life over the course of the last year and years. And one of the things that I did in my wrap up for last year was to talk about that post, talk about some of those posts. And one of the most commonly looked at posts, excuse me for all of that stuff, is on retail markup, store markup of chocolate bars. And so I wanted to go and re-examine that. So this is the page on TheChocolateLife.com that I have created for this live stream. And I create a page on the Chocolate Life, a post on the Chocolate Life for every single live stream that I produce. And this is number 80, if I recall correctly. And you can, if you'd like to, go and find the original post. So this original post was back on 2012. I transferred it from the Chocolate Life on Jam Room to the Chocolate Life on Maven, and then from the Chocolate Life on Maven to here at the TheChocolateLife.com as it currently exists on Ghost. So it's been popular for quite some time. Some comments and all that kind of stuff. But here, by clicking on this card, what you'll do is you'll be able to get to see the original post and all the comments that are associated with the original post. So just a little bit of history for what it is that we're doing. And this is the homepage of TheChocolateLife.com as it exists right now. And so you can go there and you can find out what's going on. And if you click on this card here associated with the calendar, you can find out. So here's today's live stream. We have 3 live streams today, plus the 2 future live streams. And then there's an archive that you can get to of all the live streams. So you can go to their posts on the Chocolate Life and then go watch them if you want to, either on YouTube or LinkedIn or Facebook, whichever of those makes the most sense for you. So I've also put together a concept map. So if we go and take a look, you'll see, I haven't updated it yet, but I will update it. If you go, and you'll see that there is a link to this image. And this image is a concept map. And what it's doing is it's sort of my visual reminder of what it is that I want to talk about today. And we'll go through these topics over the course of the next hour. And we'll hit each of the topics one after the other. And so links and all that kind of stuff. This is a link to the article that I was just pointed to. And if you click on the picture, not on the text, if you click on the picture, it's actually a live link onto the Chocolate Life right now. So with that background, I want to acknowledge, so Don Chocolato, Chocolateria Gourmet. I don't know where you're connecting from. Hello, what is this for? A valid question. The Chocolate Life has been around for almost 15 years now. So the 16th or 18th of January will be the 15th anniversary of the Chocolate Life. And so I started a series of daily sessions on Clubhouse during lockdown, so that people, as a way for people to communicate with each other. And every single one of those sessions on Clubhouse had a topic in and around chocolate. I did about 140 of them or something like that. It's more between 140 and 150 of them over the course of several months. And I, for one reason or another, about 2 years ago, no, it was about this time last year, what I decided to do was stop Clubhouse and move into this format, in part because I like the video format better than just having the audio recording format. It made the experience broader in terms of sharing. And so that's one of the reasons why we're there at this format. So I get to pick the topic for each one of these Chocolate Life live streams. And as I've mentioned, if you go to the calendar, what you can do is you can go and take a look at all the topics that are there. If you're a Chocolate Life member, you can email me and you can suggest a topic for a future live stream. So, this is what it is that I'm doing. This I get a chance to talk about topics that I think are important, but more importantly, I get to do some more research on these topics. I get to look into them because it's not necessarily the easiest thing to do to spend an hour talking about a particular topic or interviewing somebody and keeping a conversation going. And so that is what the Chocolate Life Live is about in many respects. This particular topic, again, is because the whole question of retail markup of chocolate bars or store markup of chocolate bars is one that is seems to be the most popular. I mean, I look at the people who find that usually as a result of some search engine is very, very high. It remains in the top 5 most popular posts in the last 2 years. And I thought it would be make sense to go and re-examine the topic. So I hope, Don Chocolato, that I've answered that question for you to your satisfaction. And if I haven't, please let me know, and I will see if I can provide some more detail. Right. So with that said, let's go to the concept map again. And we have this whole idea of the updated markup on chocolate bars here. And then we have some concepts radiating out from it. And we're going to be talking about a couple of major topics today. And the first ones I want to talk about are the cost of goods and labor and the gross markup on margin. So markup versus gross margin. And because if you want to talk about what the store markup on chocolate bars is going to be, you need to understand what your cost of goods is going to be, how much it costs you to manufacture something. Right. And so that's why I really, really want to focus on that to begin with. And once we understand what your cost structure is, we can start thinking about what it means to get that product into distribution. And we'll also be talking about some of the things that you should be aware about when you're talking about getting into distribution. So whether you're directly distributing something, whether you're doing multi-tier distribution, if your distributor has a preferred logistics partner, what your retailer is thinking about in terms of things like free fill and sampling and other kinds of policies that they have, and whether or not there are any considerations that they might have around certifications or something like that. And so what I want to, so I'm going to go and introduce a Microsoft Excel spreadsheet. And this Microsoft Excel spreadsheet that I am going to be starting with is one that I started working with around 2012, about the same time as this original post was put together, to help my consulting clients, I make my living as a consultant, understand a little bit about, right, questions around what their products cost. If you do not know what your products cost, you have no idea what to charge for them. And so what I did is I created this workbook, and I will be uploading this workbook to the post for today's live stream. So you'll be able to download it and take a look at it for yourself and start working with it. But what I wanted to do was go through it so that you get an idea about some of the things you might want to consider when you think about, okay, I need to understand what my products cost. And so one of the places, if you are a bean-to-bar chocolate maker, so you're making chocolate from cocoa beans, there is a worksheet here that helps guide you through, right, the process of figuring out just generally how much your chocolate costs if you haven't done it already. And you can enter in your own numbers for this, importantly, right, so that it can help you understand. So, for example, you might be paying, $3 a kilo at the farm gate for your beans, but by the time they land at the loading dock of your factory, let's just say it's $7 a kilo before you do anything, right? You then take 10 kilos of cocoa beans and then you clean them And what you end up with is you've taken off 700 grams of beans that, for one reason or another, doubles or trash or something like that, that you don't, you find you don't want to, you don't want to work with further. It's trash. You don't want to use it. In which case you have a 7% loss factor. And what you can do is then you can now gross up the cost of your beans, so that you started off with a $3 farm gate price. You got to a $7 delivered price. And I'm just making these up. They're the examples that are here. And then you have a cost per kilo of cleaned beans. All right, that makes it, hopefully that's straightforward. From there, you can talk about the weight of the beans before roasting, and then after roasting, before anything else. So now what you're talking about is the loss associated with moisture. You can then the weight after cracking and winnowing, and now you can get a percent yield. You started off with 10 kilos of beans, and you ended up with 7.1 kilos of beans, right? Absolutely. So here we can now start talking about, what does this mean? So I have a 70% yield from where I started. And if I start off at $7 a kilo delivered, my cost per kilo of nibs is now $9.86. So hopefully you, this is large enough. You know what? Let me do this. Large enough so that you can see it. Your cost is now $9.86. You can then type in your cost of cocoa butter. This is, again, these are just numbers. They don't represent anything which is real. Cost for sugar, cost for vanilla, cost for milk ingredients, other ingredients that might be in a recipe. And then you can say, what is your burdened labor cost? And this is a place where I think that almost everybody I know who gets into trouble in their business goes wrong. And what they don't do is they don't actually account properly for the cost of labor and what it is that they're doing. Now, you don't have to pay yourself, right? It's important. You don't have to pay yourself, but you need to understand how much labor contributes to the cost of your product. It's really, really important. So you have to put a number on that. And so a burdened labor cost, for people who may not be familiar with the concept, is not only whatever the hourly wage is, but what other taxes and benefits that might need to get paid on top of that. And so it's just a number. And so, but what you can do then is you can say, okay, I've got a recipe. Elsewhere in the sheet, you'll see that it's a 70% recipe. So percentage of the cocoa in the recipe. This is all around the worksheet. What you can do is you can say, in a 35 kilo recipe, right? I've got a little over 25 kilos of cocoa nibs and a little under 10 kilos of sugar. So this will get me to 35 kilos. And now I have down here a place where I can say how many hours of labor are associated with the recipe. And that labor includes the cost of cleaning, right? And the cost of active time. How much time am I spending while the beans are being roasted? How much time am I spending while the beans are cracking and winnowing? How much time am I spending at the melanger, in this particular case, watching things go on? So this is the important time. This is the important bit to record. How much time are you actually spending, all right, in this batch of chocolate? From here, right, we can take the other costs that are associated with it. So at, this 25.2 kilos of beans at $9.86 a kilo says that, the cost of the cocoa nibs in this recipe is almost $250. The cost of sugar is $19. We can calculate how much of the recipe is which ingredient. And then what we can also do is I can say, if I have 12 hours of labor invested in it, and this is 12 hours associated with everything over the course of the entire time. So how much time am I cleaning? How much time am I overseeing roasting? How much time am I cracking and winnowing? How much time am I spending, putting the nibs and sugar in the melanger, because I'm not throwing them all in at one time. I mean, this number may be very high, so let's suggest that it's 8 hours rather than 12 hours. And what I can do is I can get an overall cost of the recipe, really important, an overall cost of the recipe, and I can find out how much of the total cost of the recipe is associated with labor, right? And it's important to understand that it is the cost of labor which is going to be one of your largest contributors to the finished cost of products. So one of the things that I've talked about quite often over the course of the last little while is that we don't want to fetishize labor. We don't want to say that, oh, because I hand inspect every single cocoa bean, what that means is my chocolate is of a higher quality. No, right? The more time you spending, the only direct correlation that you can make between, individually inspecting every cocoa bean and the quality of the chocolate, no, all you're doing is you're increasing the cost of the chocolate. So let's say that I hand sort every single cocoa bean, right? And so rather than spending 8 hours on this, I spend 10 hours on this. Well, what has happened is that my cost of labor has gone to nearly 45% of the recipe cost. I have spent $200 on this batch of 35 kilos in terms of my labor, right? So again, irrespective of whether I pay myself, it's really, really important that I understand what that cost is and that you keep track of these costs everywhere that you go. All right. So this is one of the sheets which exists in the workbook. There's another sheet in the workbook which is also sort of central, from a bar perspective, and I'm sorry for zooming around so much, is that this is where you can take many of the different the cost components and start putting them together. This is specifically designed for chocolate bars. It can be modified, right? And this is something that I help some of my consulting clients do. This can be modified for bonbons. It can be modified for panned items. It can be modified for many things, but this particular version is a generic version, and its focus is on chocolate bars. So what I'm going to do here is I can say that I can, from this sheet, I can say, so it's up here, the cost per kilo, right? $13.67, right? The yield cost per kilo is $13.67. This automatically gets entered. It's a reference. So my chocolate cost is $13.67 per kilo. I have a loss factor. The loss factor is how much is lost in the process of tempering and depositing. So I have to move it out of the melanger into something else. Maybe I'm blocking it. I take it out of the block. I put it into the tempering machine and stuff gets spilled over the side. I just put in a loss factor, right? You can change that loss factor to what it is that you actually experience in your facility. All right. And then what I can do is I can come up with a cost per gram of chocolate. So I have a cost for inclusions, a loss factor. For one reason, I spill a little bit. There's some stuff, right? It gets spilled all over the place. Your loss factor could be 0, yay, but put a loss factor in there so that you can calculate what it is that's going on. You have an idea about where things are. And then you have a cost per gram for the chocolate and your inclusions. Now, one of the things I haven't included here is the cost of the machines that I'm using, and I haven't included the cost of the overhead. And that's one of the reasons why, if you look closely at the title of these things, they all say naive, right? Because the reason why they're naive is they don't actually consider all of the costs which are associated with a particular item, right? So I've got to leave something, right, for me to be able to do as part of a consulting project. So you can certainly go and fill these in for yourself if you'd like, but the framework is there in order to be able to do it, in order to be able to take what I've done and expand it to meet your particular needs, right? So once we've got the cost of the chocolate, the cost of inclusions, right, the cost of machine and overhead, what we can do is we can go take a look at, okay, how am I wrapping it? So I have space for 3 different wrapping elements. So you might have an inner wrap of foil, you might have an outer box, and then stickers. So you have an opportunity for wrap element 1, wrap element 2, wrap element 3, right? There's even a loss factor here. You've got foil or paper which is damaged and you don't want to use it. You have a box which is torn and you don't want to use it. Stickers, which for one reason or another, you don't want to use them. So you have an opportunity to be able to calculate all those things in there. So from here, what you do is you say, okay, what is the weight of my bar of chocolate, right? And that includes what is the weight of the chocolate and the weight of the inclusions, right? Then you can say, how many of each wrap element do I need, right? And then you have the individual cost of the ingredients, the wrap elements, labor, how much labor is associated with wrapping. So if I have over here, if I'm charging $20 an hour and I can wrap 60 units an hour, I have 33 cents of labor in each item. And so that's represented over here. And what I can do is I can find that for this 70-gram bar, assuming everything else that's going on, My naive cost of goods, right, because it doesn't include any overhead, is going to be $1.53. So cool, right? So I now have a good idea of what cost of goods is going to be. Now, I want to let you know that this gets used a bunch of different ways. So I want to go and talk about some other things before I go talk about this section of it. This particular sheet in the workbook begins to talk about how you might calculate sales and profitability based on your mix of direct retail and wholesale sales. So you say to yourself, I have one 35-kilo melanger. I do two batches a week. I can produce 70 kilos of chocolate a week. My bar weight is 70 grams per bar. So assuming no loss, I can produce 1,000 bars per week. I'm going to sell 800 of them a week. The other 200 I might reserve for one reason or another. There might be for some sampling. Again, these numbers are, let's say that what you do is you decide to sell 960 a week. So everything updates appropriately. Your cost of goods sold is $1.53. We'll get to this. Why is this number $7.38? We'll get to that right somewhere else. We'll go back to that. And then this wholesale price, we'll get back to that as well. And then what you can do here, and this is the reason why I do it, is I wanted to model what happens when 10% of my business is wholesale, right? What you'll see is that my profit or loss goes to $124,000. What happens when my wholesale percentage goes to 90% of my business? You'll find that I'm losing money, right? So the ability to model the business decisions you're making, excuse me, how much of my business is direct to consumers? How much of my business am I selling through distribution? Right? The ability to be able to go and take a look at how the impact of your business decisions is going to affect profitability is really, really important. That's one of the reasons why this is done. So we look at, weekly gross income. We look at, gross profit. We look at the average price that we're selling things for. All of this is really, really valuable data to have. Now, and this assumes that I'm working 52 weeks a year. So you can go through and you can go and decide whether you want to work 40 weeks a year or however number of weeks a year you want to work, and you'll get a number. Now, this is counterintuitive to many, many people. I've got more of my business as wholesale, right? And the more wholesale I do, the more money I lose, right? So really, really important that you understand the implications of the business decisions that you're making. And so that's one of the reasons why I put this sheet together, so you can go and just play with some of the results and figure out what it means for your business. So another thing that I put together, this is, again, a completely naive assumption that many people have, is that, okay, I'm paying $3 a kilo for beans at the farm gate, but my cost of nibs is $9.86 a kilo after having it delivered and doing all of the cleaning and cracking and winnowing and all the things that are done. So this is my cost for a kilogram of nibs, as opposed to, here's my farm gate cost. Let's zoom in on this so you can see it a little more closely. So I have a yield, which I got from the other spreadsheet. I've got the recipe, right? So the percentage of the nib in the recipe. This is from the chocolate costing sheet. If I've got 1,000 kilos of beans, this is 3,000 a metric ton, right? So that's how much I'm paying for the beans. I've got how much chocolate I've got, my bar weight, the total number of bars, the average price per bar. So you can see how these sheets are related. That what happens is that if I think about that, 6% of the farm gate price of the chocolate bar, right, is reflected in the cost of the chocolate bar. If I go and take this to I'd have to go and, rather than going $3, I'd have to go to $9. I'm only going to play this one, what we'll do is we'll find that I've doubled. So I've tripled the farm gate price of the beans, but I've only doubled the percentage of the percentage of the input cost to the finished chocolate bar. So really, really interesting thing to consider that you've got. Oh, the other thing that I haven't done is actually what has happened is this 9. This can't be 7 anymore. So maybe it's 12, right? And so I come here and I'm at 15%. So just you want to, the assumption is that it is the cost of the cocoa beans that's driving the finished price of the chocolate bar. And it turns out that that's not necessarily the case. If we look very, very closely, it is the cost of labor. That is the primary contributor, once you get past a certain point, the primary contributor to the cost of a chocolate bar. And so what you have here, right, is a set of tools which will enable you to go and look at some of your assumptions and figure out what that means for you. And yeah, so the average price comes, it's things appear to be working fairly well, all right? Now, in the sense that things appear to be working fairly well, in the sense that I have done the connecting of the results, one cell from one sheet into another sheet, so it updates properly. So I'm releasing this workbook to everybody under a Creative Commons license, so you can use it. The only thing you can't do is turn around and sell it, right? What I'm asking for is that people who use this, what they do is they let me know if there are errors in the spreadsheet, so that what I can do is I can fix these errors in future versions. And the version that I'm going to upload to the website today for you to download after this is over is in fact the most recent version. I noticed that there were some things I wanted to change as I was getting ready for today, and you'll see those changes reflected in what I'm going to upload. But before I go any further, just so I don't forget, I want to get it back to where I started off. Now, so you can use this to calculate. So one of the things we say about big chocolate, that we hate about big chocolate, is that, okay, big chocolate, if we think about a chocolate bar, only 6% of the retail price of the chocolate bar goes back to the farmer. Well, it turns out that if you're a craft chocolate maker, you may not be doing much better, right? So we need to be very, very careful about what we represent so what we represent to our customers. Yes, we may be paying more to the farmer than whatever the market price is, but that doesn't necessarily contribute to a larger percentage of the input cost of an individual chocolate bar. And you'll be able to figure out what yours is using this workbook and these sheets. Another thing that I've done, right, and I haven't added it in to the first page, is that I've gone and said, okay, I have a machine. The machine, let's say it's a melanger, it's a 35 kilo melanger or something like that. And let's just say it costs $10,000. I'm going to put it on a 3-year depreciation schedule, which makes an enormous amount of sense. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say that my machine just sitting in my factory doing nothing costs me 38 cents an hour, right? So that's just 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, right? It costs me 38 cents an hour when the machine is not turned on, right? So if it fits in a roughly standard 4 foot by 4 foot pallet, more or less, it occupies 16 square feet of floor space. If I'm paying $12 a square foot a year, I'm paying 2 cents an hour on the rent of the machine, right? So I can say that maybe energy is 11 cents a kilowatt hour. Whoops. 0.11, 11 cents a kilowatt hour, right? I can say I'm going to use this particular machine I'm not going to use it for 3 hours. I'm going to use it, let's say, for 3 days. So it's going to run for 72 hours, right? So energy used per hour. I'm sorry, this is not total 3, right? So 3 units per hour, whatever it is. I have a labor cost associated with it. Now, importantly, keep in mind that I am double counting the labor here. So if I were to try to take this number and incorporate it into another spreadsheet, I'm taking this $20 an hour here, and I'm also got the cost of cleaning, roasting, winnowing, all that kind of refining everything in here. So I need to be very, very careful about not double counting things. So just, just beware. This is where the interrelatedness of these sheets gets really, really tricky. But what I can now do is I can say, this machine, my Melanger, cost me 40 cents per hour just sitting there doing nothing, right? But it cost me 73 cents an hour running, just, right? So now what I can do is I'm saying, okay, if I have a batch that takes 72 hours, so this burden batch cost is probably a bad calculation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, all right, so this is going to be 72 hours, which is, all right, the number of hours. This is going to be this equal to this times this. And so without labor, a batch of chocolate is going to cost me, a 72-hour batch of chocolate is going to cost me $52.74 in terms of the machine cost, rent, and energy, right? And now we can start putting this into our cost structure, right? But at least now I have an idea about what that is. Really, really important that I understand it. And now what you can do is you can do that if you have a bean cleaner. So if you have a destoner or something like that, you can put that in here. You can put your cracker and winnower in here. If you have a pre-grinder, you can put it in here. If you have a conch, you can put it in here. For your tempering machine, you can put it in here. And now you can get a very, very comprehensive view of how much your machines cost to operate and their contribution to any specific batch of chocolate that you're working with. So really, really important. It's a lot of detail. It requires a good understanding of what's going on. And this is one of the reasons why detailed production logs are really, really important, right? So yeah, you need to know what you're supposed to do today, but keeping track of how much time you spend in things and how much times things actually take to do, really, really important. And this is one of the reasons why. If you don't have this information, you don't understand how to calculate your costs properly. Now, what you could do, right, again, so this is a naive, right, because I don't have everything in here. But what you could do is you could just say, I'm going to just be generic. I'm going to throw all these costs, right, just into overhead, right? So, okay, let's figure out what your overhead is. So this gross profit is taken from another sheet, from the sales and profitability sheet. And now what you can do is you can say, I'm paying $24,000 a year in rent. Here's what my utility bills are. Here is, right, my depreciation schedule for all of my chocolate machines. If I have other machines, I'm going to write them off on the same schedule, consumables. And now what you can do is you can say, okay, I have other expenses, which are $146,000. And so I'm losing $48,000 a year. Right. So now what you can do is you can start thinking, all right, where am I spending too much money? Right. Are there places where I might be able to spend more money? But now you could say, oh my gosh, right. And I haven't even thought about labor in here. I don't think labor is fully accounted for in here. And so I'm not paying myself here. Right. I'm not paying myself here at all. Right. So if I want to pay for myself, what does this do? Right. So understanding all of this, all right, right. And now coming over here is, yeah, I've got salaries, not labor. I mean, all of the things can be detailed so you can figure it out how much it costs you per hour to run your business, right? Really, really helpful in terms of understanding, how to be profitable. I mean, if anybody's gone over to the Instagram page, it's at Discover Chalk. One of the things I point is like, how to make a small fortune in chocolate. There's a joke that goes around in the internet community, which is, how to make a small fortune on the internet, and that's start with a big one, right? If you haven't done this business exercise, it's really, really challenging in order to understand how to be profitable. And I've done this so that people at least have a framework for understanding where to begin. Hopefully you've got a good accountant and your accountant is helping with you with all of these things, but this is a framework that you can use, your accountant can use, and figure it out. Now, if you really want to get geeky with this, this sheet was put together to say, okay, I want to use a melanger, but I'm not necessarily sure which size makes the most sense for me, right? So what you can do is you can go and say, okay, well, let me expand this a little bit and give myself a little more room so that I can see some more things. So you can say, here's the batch capacity for my kilogram. Here's the price. So I can calculate a capital expenditure for a given size batch of chocolate. And now what I can do is I can say, if I have one machine at 4 kilograms per batch size, roughly 10 pounds, right? And I can do it in 24 hours. I can do a batch in 24 hours, number of batches a day. I'm going to do 6 batches a week. My maximum production is 24 kilos a week. I'm working 40 weeks a year. And now I can produce a maximum of 960 kilos of chocolate. Okay. So here with that machine, I can calculate how much chocolate that I can produce given a particular machine size, and then what the cost per kilo from the machine is. And that's whether you're using melangers or universals or ball mills, right? Now, again, these are not necessarily apples to apples comparisons because they work differently, but it does provide you with a framework so that you can start thinking about what is the cost of what's going on. All right. So it's big and gnarly, right? But it does give you an idea of some of the complexity of what it is that's going on. And, again, I think that if you are a chocolate maker or a confectioner, that understanding this is really, really important. Now, one of the things that is here is also, how big a tempering machine do I need, right? And so one of the things you can say is, if I'm depositing chocolate bars, how much tempered chocolate do I need and how many moles can I fill in a given period of time? And so you can say, here's my bar weight per gram. Let's make it 70, right? I have 3 cavities per mold and I can deposit 6 molds per minute, right? And I do 1 shift a day, 6 workable hours in a shift. You never have an 8-hour shift because you have to get ready and you have to clean, right? You have to take a lunch break. And this is probably so closer to 5 hours by the time you get done, right? I work 5 days a week. I work 42 because I'm a Douglas Adams fan. And so I'm working 1,050 hours a year. And now what I can do is I can calculate how many moles per minute, how many bars per minute, how much chocolate I need per minute, and then per minute, per hour, per shift, per week, per year. And so, cool, given 70-gram bars, right, in a 3 bars per mold at 6 molds per minute, assuming that I can do 1 shift a day, right, and working for 42 weeks a year, theoretically, I can produce a 1,134,000 bars of chocolate in 1 year, right? So this is ideal. It assumes that nothing ever goes wrong. You can work 100% efficiently. So this is one of the reasons why this is a naive calculation, but it does give you an idea about what it is that's possible. And you say, oh, that's 79 metric tons of chocolate. So cool. It gets you an idea about what it is that's possible. And this will help you understand what size tempering machine you need. So if I need 76 kilograms of chocolate per hour, your tempering machine probably has to have a working bowl capacity of at least 25 kilograms if you have a continuous tempering machine. That's one of the things that number tells you, right? So this is a great way of helping you determine the capacity of what you're doing. Right. Again, there's no downtime here for cleaning or changeover or any maintenance or anything like that. Right. But this represents perfect 100% production efficiency. And I've done the same thing for enrobing, and I've actually modified it this morning, and I will fix this up. So what you've got here is you have a belt width in millimeters, right, and a tunnel length in meters, right. Now that tunnel length in meters is only appropriate for trying to figure out how long a tunnel you need in order to be able to cool your product properly. But what's most important is this belt speed, right? You have this belt speed in terms of meters per minute, right? So the belt is running at 1 meter per minute. The belt speed is running at 2 meters a minute, however long the belt is running, right? So now what you can do is you can say, on average, across a 180 millimeter belt, which is about 7 inches, I can get 3 pieces, right? So this is assuming one person is running the enrober, right? I can get 6 rows per meter on average, and I really do recommend that everybody use the metric system when it comes to dimensions and weights, and times and temperatures. Well, not times, temperature, and all that kind of stuff, because it will make these calculations just insanely easier. So if I do 3 pieces per row, and I can do 6 rows per meter, right? What that means is I can get 18 pieces per meter, and the belt is running at 1 meter a minute. If the belt is running at 2 meters a minute, it's 36 pieces per minute. So boom. But I'm the only person running that belt. So chances are I spend half my time, right? And so rather than working this out on a time basis, I'm just going to cut the belt speed in half, right? So I put pieces on the belt, I run them through, I stop the belt, right? Take the pieces off. I then go back to the other side. So I'm cutting the speed in half. Right. Even so, one person running this belt can produce 540 pieces an hour. Very, very cool. Really, really interesting to know that one person can do that. If every single piece has got 5 grams of chocolate on it, I only need 2.7 kilograms of chocolate per hour. And the reason why that's important is everybody says, oh, I need a 30 centimeter wide belt to produce 600 pieces an hour. Right. And the answer to the question is no, you don't. Right, that you really only start needing much, much wider belts when you start getting into much, much bigger production. You don't need that much. You don't need a 30 centimeter belt. Why do people say you need a 30 centimeter belt? Because it turns out that the diameter of the tempering bowl means that's what we offer. Right? We can't offer anything smaller because it's what the tempering machine can do. So you can actually use a much narrower belt for very high volume production in robing. So here's another thing that people don't think about. If the cost of the chocolate that you're using is $15 a kilo, and I think that if we're using our own chocolate, the number we had was like $13.76 a kilo, then it costs me 11 cents in chocolate per piece. Right. So now I can figure out, if I'm getting, a much less expensive chocolate and it's costing me $9 a kilo, or I'm using a much more expensive chocolate, say I'm buying Valrhona as opposed to Calabout, I get a cost per piece for chocolate. Yay. I can do a similar kind of thing for the center. And so I get an idea of what the cost per piece is. But more importantly, if this is my labor cost, right, and I have one person working this belt, just me, and I'm paying them $20 an hour, that the labor cost for enrobing is $4 per piece, right? Now, let's assume that what I'm doing is I'm going to bump this up to 2 meters a minute. So I'm doing 2,000 pieces an hour. But in order to do that, I need 3 people running the belt, right? Even though it appears that my labor costs have gone through the roof, they're now $60 an hour as opposed to 24 hours. The contribution of labor to the individual piece, right, has actually gone down, right? And it stays fairly flat overall. So one of the things that I love about the way enrobing works is that it turns out that the contribution of labor ends up being relatively small and relatively static going forward. It is, in fact, from a labor perspective, one of the most efficient ways of getting anything done in your factory. So this can be used as, again, part of a framework for figuring out what this all means. So we now go, back to the second sheet we took a look at, and here is the really important stuff to know about, right? And we're going to talk about gross markup versus margin, or markup versus gross margin. So the difference between markup and margin: if I have a product that costs $1, 25% Markup means that, oh, that dollar becomes $1.25 because 25% of a dollar is 25 cents. If I want a gross margin on top of a dollar, right? If I take that 25%, what means is that that dollar ends up being um, it ends up being a smaller proportion of the finished price. And so that dollar actually becomes $1.33. That 33%, when you come to $1.33, is in fact 25% of that price. So I've got, 3/4 of it are represented by the dollar, and then 1/4 of it, that's the 25%, is represented by the that extra 33%. So it may not seem like a lot, and I'm sorry if I'm not exactly explaining it clearly right now. But the difference between a 25% markup and a 25% gross margin, right, is the difference between $1.25 and $1.33, and that 8 cents is really, really important. So the first thing the actual calculation for gross margin is in the spreadsheet. You can figure out what it means. So I take a cost of goods sold from over here, $1.53, and what I do is I run it through the gross margin calculation, and I get, I take 50% on 153, that is 153, and here's the gross margin calculation. And, right, I find that if I have a cost of goods sold of $1.53, I want a 50% gross margin. The minimum price I need, the price that I'm going to sell this for, is $1.53. That's it, right? So if I sell that to a broker, and the broker sells it to a distributor, and I don't have VAT because I'm not in the UK or another country where VAT is important, right? That what happens is that my $1.53 cost of goods and my $3.05, because I want a 50% gross margin, ends up being that the retail price has got to be $7.50, more or less. The retailer is going to take whatever price you've got, this $3.69 after the gross margin and the markup, right? And they're going to double it. So it's really important to know that the retailer, whoever it is going to take whatever price you've got, right? And what they're going to do is they're going to double it, right? So the reason why this is important, and I don't want to underestimate the importance of this understanding, right, is that if you've spent your entire startup phase selling directly to customers, right, and so you're capturing 100% of the retail margin, but what you haven't done is you want to get into distribution, but you haven't considered the costs of distribution, right? Then you don't understand how your margin, right, that you've been enjoying, 100% of retail margin, what it means to give somebody else a cut in between. And what happens here is that this spreadsheet here, or this part of the workbook here, will help you understand, right, how much you're making, right, and how much you're giving away. So, for example, right, we've got this calculation, and it's like how many bars per kilogram at 70 grams per bar, like 980 grams, right? We're doing 1,000 kilograms of chocolate a year, right? If we can calculate what our average return on a kilo of chocolate is, and then if we sell that at retail, this is how much we earn, $105,000. We sell 100% of it at wholesale, we are earning $43,000. So what we've done is we've given away $62,000, right, in terms of what we could have been making. Right now, what we could do is, like, normally what people can do is, let's say, okay, I don't hope this doesn't break. It doesn't break. So let's say I'm selling direct, right? I'm not paying any VAT. Let's say that what I want is a 25% gross margin. What happens now is that my $1.53 cost of goods, right? Again, this is naively, becomes $4.07 at retail. Right, so my cost of goods, I'm making 50 cents per bar, but notice that the retailer is making $2 per bar, right? So good to know. You're making 50 cents, the retailer is making $2. This is why, if I'm selling, say, directly to somebody like A Priori, And so what they're doing is they're taking 15%. This is what happens to the cost. Right? So, and again, if you're working in a country where there's VAT, you can throw VAT in there. But you can see how very, very quickly, man, we went from, this gross margin, all right, you can see very, very quickly how, again, these business decisions that you make are fundamental, right, just radical changes in the amount of money that your business makes. And this is why I did this. So you can go, again, I will upload this to TheChocolateLife.com, the page for the post for today's live stream, and you'll be able to download this yourself and go play with it. Right. So again, wherever you are, right, put something in the comments. Let me know that you're watching. I'll give a quick shout out. If you have any questions, of course, you can ask them at any time. I will try to respond to them as I move forward. So having said that, and thanking everybody for joining me today, all through that, all right? So we talked about markup versus gross margin. That was done in there. We talked about direct distribution. You're selling directly to your customer as opposed to a dual tier distribution. You're selling to an intermediary, a broker or distributor who is selling to the retailer, or you have a broker and a distributor, right? And they're selling to the retailer. It's really important that you understand the aspects of your distribution and how each time you add a tier of distribution to what you're doing, it's going to significantly impact your income. And so in understanding how your cost of goods and what gross margin you want to make, not markup, but gross margin you want to make on your labor. So, what your minimum price for a bar is, right? Now, you may decide that you want to sell it for less, right? Because you're willing to take a slightly lower gross margin to get into a particular distribution and keep the cost the same. That's a decision that you make. But at least, with this, you have a tool which will help you understand, what those decisions look like economically related to your business. All right. So having said that, if you're selling into distribution, right, you don't have a whole lot of leverage in terms of the pricing that you can demand. The retailer is going to say, listen, if it's a specialty retailer or a chocolate specific retailer, they'll be able to say, yes, I can sell a $12 or $15 bar as opposed to an $8 or $9 bar. So where you want to be at retail is going to determine ultimately the highest price you're going to be able to charge, that they're going to be able to turn around and double in order to make their money back. But keep in mind that some places do have preferred logistics partners. So for example, if you want to get into Whole Foods at a regional or national level, chances are you need to go through either Unify or KeHE. That's just the way Amazon works with respects to its policy at Whole Foods. Now, you might be able to get into your local Whole Foods and you're dealing directly with a buyer there, although that's increasingly less common as Amazon has taken over distribution, the supply chain for Whole Foods. Then you have a little bit more leeway in terms of what you can charge, and you might in fact be able to ship directly to the store. But if you're in regional or national distribution, you're going to need to get your product to this preferred logistics partner, right? And this preferred logistics partner is going to make demands on you. Either they're going to pick up at your warehouse or you have to ship to their warehouse. All right, so there are going to be costs associated with that. And we haven't even talked about the cost of shipping in any of this. So we need to consider that in terms of everything else. Again, these spreadsheets are naive, right? In this respect, that they don't consider all of the costs. So you might have a preferred logistics partner. Now, this is going to be, much more likely in terms of national distribution than if you're selling directly to some retailer that has only got 1 or 2 or 3 stores, or maybe 10 to 20, or is in 1 state or 2 states, as opposed to got much broader coverage, right? Some of these retailers, and again, Amazon and Whole Foods, right, is one of them, may require or may prefer organic certification, or may refer some sort of fair trade or other kind of certification. And so the retailer themselves may have very, very specific policies with respect to the kind of products that they prefer. And then you run into a whole range of costs, which if you're not aware, you need to be really, really careful. When you step into the negotiations with somebody like Whole Foods or some big gourmet national chain or regional chain, one of the things that they may say is, listen, on the first order, what we want you to do is we want you to give us what they call free fill. And what the free fill is that the first product that the retailer puts up on the shelves, they're not going to pay for. You're going to have to give it to them for free, just to put on the shelf, right, as part of the marketing that gets done. Now, why are they doing that? It lowers their costs, right? So they're in the position to determine the cost structure and to dictate the terms of the cost structure for the most part, and they are risk averse. So you need to be very, very careful about understanding in the arrangement that you might come to, and what your distributor, if you're working with a distributor, hopefully they should understand this as well, what this means, right, in terms of free fill. And your willingness to pay free fill may determine whether or not you get into a particular location. Just, that's the way it is. Many of these stores do have sampling policies. So, for example, they may say, you can come in once a month or once a quarter, and we'll give you a place in the store where you can sample stuff, and you have to provide all of the samples and all of the labor because you provide the person and you're paying for that person. Or, right, I can think of Costco, for example, as one. They'll say, okay, you have to hire our people, right? In which case they may not have the same kind of product knowledge, right, that you do. So, but they say, listen, we have to have this control because we want our employees to take care of this stuff. And then you provide us the product. We're not taking it out of inventory. You provide us the product. Or if we do take it out of inventory, we're charging you for it, for the sampling. They may have promotion policies. They may say, once a year, we're going to put you in our circular and you're going to pay us X number of dollars for being in our circular. And it's not negotiable, right? You're going to have to be a part of this promotion. And this is what it costs. And if you want to be on our shelves, this is what it costs, right? And then finally, the thing to really, really be concerned about when it comes to thinking about store markup, right, and retail pricing is that a big store is going to have a return policy. And as a matter of fact, the logistics partner may have a return policy as well. So what might happen is that the store may say, listen, if we don't sell it and it gets within 90 days of the best by date, we are shipping it back to you. You're paying for the return shipping, and then we're going to bill you, right, for the difference between what we bought and what we sold, right? And you can imagine that if you think you've banked, say, $1,000, right, and then all of a sudden what happens is they're shipping back to you a third of what you sent them, and they're charging you for it, that $1,000 you thought you banked might only be $600, right? And so you need to understand what the return policy is going to be and how it'll affect what it is going on in terms of your bottom line. If you do not consider, right, what that return policy is and what its impact might be, you could find yourself thinking you're having a very good year and end up having a very bad year. So when we talk about what the retail markup here, right, and let's go back to the spreadsheet, all of this stuff here, right, doesn't consider the cost of free fill, it doesn't consider the cost of sampling, it doesn't consider the cost of promotion, and it doesn't consider the cost of returns, right? So you also need to be thinking about that when you're thinking about what the store markup on chocolate bars is. And that gets us back to the topic for today's live stream, right on the hour, just about perfectly. So when we're looking at the retail markup on chocolate, whether it's a bit of bean to bar, whether it's a confectionery, and you want to get it into your own store, that's fine. You're absorbing all that internal markup. So you are not, having to pay for a broker. You're not having to pay for a distributor. You're not having to pay for any, what they call slotting fees. If you want your chocolate in a particular place on the shelf, you want it at eye level rather than on the floor, or you want it in an end cap. Those are slotting fees. They can get really expensive. The retailer may say, listen, we can give you analytics on how well your product is selling, but we're going to charge you for the cost. We're going to charge you for providing those analytics. Right? You need to understand it. So if you're selling at retail, yes, if you're selling at your own retail, you have all of these costs. You've got rent, you've got labor, all of these things are associated with it, but you get to absorb 100% of the difference between your cost of goods, right, your gross margin, and what the retail price is. You get all of that to play with. However, when you start selling outside of your direct sales environment, when you get other people involved, right, what you need to do is you need to consider a much, much wider range of costs, right, which you may not have considered before, you may not have thought of before. And that's one of the reasons why today I wanted to go through and take a look at re-examining the retail markup on chocolate bars, or retail markup not just on chocolate bars, but in confections, and take a look at, how you might calculate some of those costs. And so these costs are in this workbook that I've created. Let me get it. So I have a workbook. And again, what I will do is I will upload it to the post for today's live stream. You are free to use this for your own internal business. Please do not replicate it and try to represent it as your work as opposed to someone else's work. If you'd like some help in navigating this with your particular business situation, I do offer consulting services, and I can help you understand how to make this apply to your particular consideration, your particular business. So please, you can get in touch. And again, one of the reasons for distributing it this way is that if you do find a mistake in the calculation, what you can do is you can let me know, hey, I found a mistake, or here's something that I think you might be able to explain much clearer in terms of where things are. And I will do my best to update the worksheet and the workbook in order to be able to reflect those changes. There's also another sheet that I haven't talked about, and this enables you to just very, very quickly eyeball what the gross income, right, from chocolate is going to be. So if you can produce 35 kilos a batch, and you have 2 grinders, and each can produce 2 batches a week, you can produce 140 kilos a year, 140 kilos a week, you can produce 7,000 kilos a year, 7 metric tons, right? If you sell the chocolate for an average of 60 euros per kilo, this is how much you can earn. So you've got $420,000. This $466,000 is based upon an old exchange rate. So the exchange rate is down here. So you can change the exchange rate and convert euros into dollars. So this gives you just a real quick basis to say, okay, how much chocolate do I need at what price in order to be able to get this kind of income? And it says I could make a gross income of close to €500,000 a year, $500,000 a year, if what I can produce is I can produce 7 metric tons of chocolate, right? That I can sell for 60 euros a kilo, or $30 a pound. So that's what this particular sheet is for. And all of the sheets that I've shown you today are in the workbook, and you can go, you'll be able to download those in the next hour or so. And with that, I want to thank everybody who stayed with me until the end. And I want to let you know that I have, you know what? I went through the entire explanation without sharing my screen. There's another sheet here, right? And you can use this sheet to calculate a bunch of other things as well. So all of these things are included in the workbook that I will be uploading. I want to let you know a couple of things. Number one is that this coming Tuesday, I am going to be starting a new series on the Chocolate Life. It's going to be about chocolate in New York. And tomorrow I'm going to be visiting with Rhonda Cave, who's the founder of Ronnie Sue Chocolate. And I'm going to be just prepping for this coming Tuesday's live stream, where we spend an hour talking about making chocolate in New York City and the journey that Rhonda went through from when she started I sold her a piece of equipment, I want to say 15, 16 years ago. So I've known her for quite some time. And so it's going to be great to catch up with her. And that is the stream for this coming Tuesday. And a week from today, I'm going to be examining the topic, where does chocolate come from? Number one is, in the whole issue associated with language, I started doing some research about how people are talking about cacao and chocolate and where it comes from and how chocolate is made. And people may have noticed that I've been doing some work using artificial intelligence to generate images. So a program called DALL-E. There's a related program called Chat.GPT, which can generate text in a variety of styles for you. And so I want to go through and talk about my special guest a week from today is going to be the output from a couple of artificial intelligence engines who are trying to describe how chocolate is made and where chocolate comes from. And with that, what I want to do is I want to say, hey, thank you everybody for joining me here today. Give me a thumbs up if you like what it is. Subscribe, share on YouTube. If you can, and you're not already a member of The Chocolate Life, please head over to TheChocolateLife.com and you can click on this join button here. There's always a free subscription level, but if you have the ability to help support my work financially, of course, I would appreciate that. And with that, I'm going to close as I end every single one of my live streams with mentioning, listen, if you're working with chocolate and you're not having fun, I think you're doing it wrong. Ciao, everybody, and we'll see you in the future.